Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for attending. I'm Scott Rogers. I call to order the Appropriations Committee meeting of Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. This open meeting of the Northborough Appropriations Committee is being conducted in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Northborough Appropriations Committee are allowed to participate either in person or remotely. The Act allows the committee to meet in person and remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream or the recording of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. I'd like to confirm that all the committee members and the anticipated agenda participants are present and can be heard. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bob D'Amico. Here. Terry Halloran.
Here.
Tim Kalin.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Stephanie Bacon.
Here.
Jason Little.
Present.
All right, thank you so much. First item on the agenda is public comment. If there is any, please raise your hand in the meeting or here in the room. Going once, going twice. Great, thank you. We've got a number of things here to do this evening. It's jam-packed, so very quickly just take care of some housekeeping. We've got the approval of meeting minutes for February 4th and February 13th. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes for March 4th.
Thank you,
February
Bob.
4th.
Second.
February 4th, we've got Bob and Terry. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
We got to go roll call because that's him. Tim?
Aye.
Scott's an aye. February 4th approved. How about February 13th?
Yeah, move to approve February 13th.
Moved
Second.
by Bob, seconded by Terry. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
I think that was the one I missed, so I'll abstain.
Fair enough. Scott's an aye, so we are 3-0-1 abstention. Thank you very much. Thanks for the participants. So let me rush through that. If it's all right with the Assabet Valley team, I'd like to move you forward in the agenda. And that allows you to get through the items because with the Northborough bits, and this is at the request of the Northborough teams and Algonquin regional team, so not a surprise. So just want to acknowledge, that flexibility and that graciousness. I know that you've got the feasibility study committee happening early or later tonight, but I think there's a recognition that our work here won't be complete by then. So thank you to the superintendent and the team for willing to stay with us later.
Thank you.
Pull my stuff out of here. And then Superintendent Hull, just so we can, we've got a packed night, so we did receive the presentation in our package on Friday, I believe it was. So you can go fairly quickly through. I don't want to rush you, but I also don't want to have you skip over important information. So
Sure.
I don't want to shortchange you in any way, but I
I
also
will give
want to
you the Cliff Notes version.
right away.
All right. So good evening, folks. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and thank you to Superintendent Martineau and the folks from the Northborough-Southborough School District. My name is Ernest Houle. I'm the Superintendent Director at Assabet Valley. I have my esteemed colleague, the Chair, and Northborough Representative, Virginia Sims-George, with us this evening, and she's going to, I think, get us started
We didn't
with
introduce
some,
you.
oh, yes, and my interim Director of Business Operations, Jean Savoy, is with us, sitting behind us. So
Okay.
I'm going to let Virginia start us off.
Okay, so we'll be presenting our FY26 budget plan while addressing strategic planning initiatives and addressing their increased needs of MLL, SEL, and mental health. FY '25 continues our trend of all in-district students in our freshman class. Total number of students for FY '26 is 75 as of October 1, '24. There's an increase of 8 students from FY '25 as of October 1, '23. FY '26 assessment, $1,699,103, which is $289,400, less than FY '25. Okay, and we can skip that. So, we have a total number of students of 74. The average GPA is 3.16, and limited English proficiency 2, special education 33, co-op 4, and economic disadvantage 29. Shop choice is actually tied with house carpentry and plumbing, and third is metal fabrication. So last year, our graduation, total number of students graduating was 14, 4-year public school, 2-year public school, 1, 4-year private school, 4, 2-year private, none, and work, 5. In the MCS average, the English was 500.37, math was 500.22, and 497.44 was science.
Excellent. That's that. So that's a couple of slides that are generally not in your packet. We have it in our more developed budget book, which you'll see for town meeting. The one thing I will just say on the sheet she was reading from, that's our secondary students, so it doesn't include any post-secondary. So you'll see that you have a total of 75 students, but 74 of them were secondary with 1 post-secondary student. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't give you some different numbers. The first slide is my superintendent director's welcome. I'm not going to read through that.
Excuse me, Superintendent, let me just acknowledge that our committee member Jeff Knight has arrived. If Jeff, you just acknowledge that you're here. 'Cause it's still
I'm
a-
here, my apologies.
Awesome. Thank you, that helps us for the minutes.
No problem. So as Virginia mentioned, our FY '26 budget is a budget that is based off of, when we budget for Assabet, it's based on the revenue that we're collecting through the state. So what you'll see is there's an increase of 11.1% in the budget over FY '25. That's an indication of 67 additional overall in-district students. As Virginia mentioned, and this has been happening over the past number of years, we continue that trend of our freshman classes coming in being all in-district students. And what that means, because I know we, sometimes when we have meetings with Finance Committee, Select Board, we have new folks on, that over the past 4 years, we've seen this trend that we're taking less out-of-district students, which used to offset the member assessments, in having more interest from our in-district students. And by law, state law, we're supposed to be taking those in-district students. So in this budget, the numbers that we're going to share with you, we have 1196 when it comes to total overall school budget, enrollment rather. 108 of those students are out of district. The other 1,086 are in district. In June of '25, 47 of those seniors are out of district seniors that will be graduating. So as you can imagine, this trend's going to continue for 1 more year. And that we're going to have another high, probably budget increase for the next year, and then it should level off in '28. So as we move through this real quick, it's about a $3,056,267 increase over FY '25. I have a slide that will explain that. It does include 2 new positions that are getting us back to pre-COVID levels, phys ed teacher and an ELD teacher. We'll be starting actually the first year of a new transportation contract. I know you'll be hearing the same from my colleagues from the Northborough Southborough School District, and that it was a 37% increase to our transportation contract. And what that includes is 4 additional bus routes based on the number of kids riding. And there is some technology that's included with that, which is some Wi-Fi camera upgrades to the buses, and also a GPS type model that parents and students can track where the buses are. At this time, the health insurance costs are unknown. We're still in negotiations. It's to be brought before the school committee, but we're hearing anywhere between a 10 to 14%. And I've also heard, because we are a self-funded district, anywhere as upwards of 20% that some folks have been having. We are lucky that we have some favorable claims data, so I don't expect it to be that high, but we're playing on a 10 to 14 range. And right now, our percentage for insurance is 75-25% split, anyone hired prior to July 2019, and it's a 70-30 split for anyone hired after the fact. And then we have $100,000 in our OPEB costs, and this year, there is no out-of-district tuition being applied to the FY26 budget. So you'll see that change when we look at our health insurance costs. There's basically a $1.5 million increase, and that's because of the out-of-district tuition not being added to this budget. Next page, it says introduction. Just a quick overall, 67 in-district students. And by having that amount of students, you'll see how the Chapter 70 funding and minimum local contribution and transportation aid, what the kind of state funding that we'll be getting for that. That's basically on that introduction slide, which is a $2,664,107 increase of state funding that we'll be receiving. Overall, as I mentioned, our total increase is $3,056,267. So there's an additional above minimum net school spending of $392,000 that we're adding to this budget. The budget is at a 100% net school spending, so we're at the very bottom basis of where we could be according to DESE. The next is a topic slide. Page 2 is just a quick overview. I've kind of already talked about this, except for the standpoint of the capital debt assessment. We're going into the 10th debt service payment year. Every year that payment goes down by $55,000. You'll see in the slide when we get to it, there's an average that basically holds true for the life of that bond. But our total FY26 budget is $30,614,095. Page 3 are our budget drivers. I'll just highlight a couple. Virginia mentioned our strategic planning priorities of teacher staff diversity, long-term facility planning, and also promotion of a safe and supportive school culture and school community. We talked about the MLL students and then SEL and mental health. We are seeing a number of special education students that are coming to our school district. Although the number of percentage of those students is dropping, we're seeing the level of services needed for those students increasing. Some of that is through specialized special education transportation, as well as services. And being a regional vocational school district, we do not have access to circuit breaker. So any of those special ed costs that are potentially unanticipated are somewhat calculated in this, but we rely heavily on IDEA and Title I, Title IV type grants to help us with those costs. Those are costs that I should also note are not additionally assessed to our member communities. Our out-of-district folks, we have an a la carte type service that the out-of-district students that are receiving special ed services are charged an additional assessment above for those students receiving special ed services. So there is a benefit to being a member of the district. And then as with anything, inflation, we run an educational delivery model which requires consumables, wood, copper, metal, wire, gases, things of that nature, food for culinary, and some of those things can be used over and over until there's nothing left. But the cost of all those things to operate our CTE programs tends to climb. The 2 staffing adjustments are in there. We currently have 2 phys ed teachers that basically have a course load of 400 students each on any given week. So we're looking to increase that extra phys ed teacher to drop those numbers down. Page 5 is the enrollment.
Well, just a comment then for the
Sure.
ELD instructor, do you have other?
So ELD, that's English Learning Development Instructor. So we've seen our multi-language learners numbers increase. And so because of the number of students that have increased, we hadn't had any ELD teacher on staff prior. So now, because of the numbers, we need to make sure we're addressing those folks. Yep. Let's see. Page 5, enrollment changes. You'll see Northborough is the 5th one down, far left. Northborough, you can follow it over, grade 9, grade 10, 11, and 12. And then there's the one post-secondary student for a total of your 75. You had 67 from October 1 of 23. As of October 1 of 24, it went up to 75. Okay? That's the enrollment. Assessment follows the statutory method of assessment based on our regional agreement. This is just the definition on page 6 of what statutory method is. Broken down, it's basically the minimum local contribution, which is also known as the aggregate wealth model. Again, definition there, that's something that the state determines. And then minimum local contribution, also determined by the state. If you slip quick to page 9, 9 would be our Chapter 70 summary. On the far left, you just basically see the breakdown of how that formula works. And our change in aid on the bottom is 11,083,000. Ooh, that's 668, according to my glasses here. And then on the far right, you'll see the comparison from FY25 to FY26. And there's the breakdown of enrollment, foundation budget, district contribution, Chapter 70 aid, required net school spending, and you'll see the percent of foundation at the very bottom, which states 100% is where we're at. Now, the one thing you'll see is it says there's a change of 64 students. There are 3 additional school choice students that we don't get funding through the state for. However, they may be students that reside in one of our 7-member towns, and because of a personal situation or circumstance, may have become homeless or fallen under DCF. They may still be residing within your community, but they may be attending their previous school district of which they were. For example, I know that we had a student that was residing in one of our member communities that's still attending Northeast Technical School out in Wakefield and is being bused there every day. But because the only housing that they could find or bed that they could find for this individual was in one of our member communities, they're allowed to stay in the school district in which they were at, but they're living in a different community. So what happens is that vocational school can't bill the town, so what they do is they bill Assabet, and then we end up paying that invoice directly to the school, school district. Okay? So that's the difference when you see 67 to the 64 of what the state's funding. Okay? Yeah, we don't, Assabet doesn't participate in school choice from the standpoint of we take, we're just oversubscribed. But when it comes to this scenario with a kid that's placed beyond their control, it falls under school choice. The next slide, page 10, is just for your reference. It just shows the net school spending and foundation budgets. They haven't updated this through DESI yet, but we have our 7-member communities, and then Assabet is at the bottom of that blue box at the very top, so you can kind of just compare. Page 11 is the minimum local contribution tab that breaks it down by community. In the blue boxes, you'll see that FY26 we've highlighted. Yeah, next slide. FY26 we highlighted, and you'll see Northborough again, 5th one down from the top. If you follow it over, 75, 8 additional students, and then it says $1,483,521 is the minimum local contribution that the state is basically saying that based on the aggregate wealth model that Northborough would be paying. So that's a $255,927 $255,927 increase for those 8 additional students. Page 12 is our overall, I call it the whole money slide, because it gives you the snapshot completely of what makes up your assessment. On the very top, across the blue, again, those are our minimal local contribution numbers. We're just showing them in a different way. We've just talked about them. That's $1,483,521. Then in the yellow box that you'll see under Northborough, those are the above minimum assessment required. So those are the additional things that make up the assessment for our member communities. The net busing, far total to the right, that $1,055,456, that is the remainder of what the state is not completely reimbursing us for. So the governor's budget is at a 95% regional transportation reimbursement rate this year. It's about a $35,070 increase for us over FY25. So the state's going to fund $914,654. Our bus contract is coming in at $1,970,110. So the difference, that $1,055,456, is which gets split between our 7 member communities. So Northborough's share of that is $72,891. The OPEB trust fund, again, that's a share of the $100,000 that you see far right, $6,906. And then the capital improvement fund, if you recall, last year we implemented a stabilization fund for capital improvement, and of that 250,000, 17,265 is Northborough's. The long-term debt service payment, that's for the renovation project that completed in 2016. That's the 3-year average that will stay for the life of the bond. That's 118,520. So your overall FY26 assessment, 1,699,103. If you look at the bottom, it's just a breakdown of your enrollment. Once again, 74 secondary students, 1 post-secondary, for a total of 75. The next couple pages are just on the capital debt assessment, which we've already talked about, but it's a $1.1 million principal payment each year, and then the interest drops by $55,000 each year. This year, it's an interest of $602,875. And on the next page, page 14, you'll see that's the 3-year rolling average for Northborough, regardless of what your operating share is each year. This 3-year average will remain the same. That's 6.96%, and that dropped by $3,828. The next page, page 15, gives you the debt service schedule payment, and that's on, we're in year 10, so there's 15 years to go. And I would say my predecessors, I would congratulate them on setting this up in order to allow fiscal planning and responsibility for our communities based on this schedule. The page 16 is another snapshot of all the revenue overall. And again, it just lists where some of the revenue funding streams are. At the very top is the Chapter 70 aid, which is the slide we showed you, at $11,083,668. Again, this is based on the overall 67 students we have. Northborough, again, under the MLC, is that number of $1,483,521. Assabet District, this is where we would have applied in the past the out-of-district tuition. When I started here 10 years ago, Assabet was applying about $5.5 million towards out-of-district tuition, towards member assessments, which meant that the member communities had about 2/3 of the population at Assabet, and out-of-district students, it was about 300 plus or so students that were there, 400 plus, I should say. Obviously, with that shift, we have the member assessments that are going up, taking on full responsibility for operational shares. The E&D is excess and deficiency. We're applying 400,000 of that this year. There's 150,000 in interest income, and the Medicaid reimbursement is really based on enrollment. That's always a moving target. It's based on the students that are in, that are basically qualified to receive certain services that Medicaid will reimburse. So we pretty much have that at a standard number. Moving down to state reimbursements, regional school transportation, there's that $914,654. And then the member above community assessments, you'll see again, it's listed down there as a total, $215,582, for our overall budget of $30,614,095. And the last slide I really have, because there's two, the very last one is our timeline, and the page before that, 18, is our expenditures by function. I can just give you a quick little overview of where the highlights are from that. In the 1,000 function code, I should ask, are there any questions? Are we holding them till the
I
end?
was holding to the end, but if you want, we can,
It's up to you. You want me to get through this last slide and we'll
Yeah,
go
do
back?
go through the highlights on this.
Yeah, let's do
last
that,
Page
then we'll-
18, and then we'll
Okay,
got some questions.
sure. So under administration is IT software and hardware. That's about an $80,000 increase. In 2000, we do have some special education increases and some contractual. Right now, we're in the midst of negotiations with our Unit A, Unit B contracts. So those are unsettled, so we have some place markers there. The medical health, that's based on new hire. We're seeing that as we hire new staff, they're potentially at lower costs than what our veteran staff who are retiring are at. So there's a slight reduction of about $13,000 there. Pupil transportation, that's a $517,230 increase. That's the new bus contract and the 4 additional buses. Athletics, we have a $55,000 increase there, which is tied to a hockey rink rental for the hockey team, as well Assabets, as well as the other students that we have from some of our other communities. Skills USA for the other student activities. That was a program that's like the Olympics for career and technical schools. That used to be funded through Perkins, but that's been shifted $7,300 into the budget. We've had some longer-term leaves in our maintenance, operation and maintenance department. So we have a custodial contract service that's about $86,000 that we've had to add in that line. Let's see, contribution of retirement, that's a $36,000 increase. That's just due to normal separation and retirement. The insurance of active employees, that's the $5,200. That has the 1,605,725. That's the out-of-district tuition, as we are not relying on out-of-district tuition to revenue fund our budget. That's the out-of-district moving into the overall budget. Insurance for retirees, $15,000 increase. And then we have student building increases for all other insurances. That's for our students that do off-campus type work, co-op, that type of stuff. And $80,000 for technology purchases on the capital and fixed. Those are after COVID, when we did not have a one-to-one program, when COVID hit. After that, we made some arrangements and adjustments in moving to a lease-type program for our technology. So every 4 years, as a student comes in as a freshman, they get a brand-new Chromebook. When they leave, that Chromebook gets turned in, and a new leased Chromebook comes in for the new freshman that's starting. So our technology with that platform is pretty much new, renewed every 4 years. So that kind of completes my quick overview. I hope I wasn't too lengthy. Tried not to get into a lot of detail.
Thank you for that. So, yeah, questions from committee, Jeff?
I just wanted to quickly revisit I know we talked a lot last year about the method of assessment.
Sure.
But this is the first time that I've caught that it's one of two potential methods and you kind of quickly said, by agreement, we use a statutory assessment method. So I'd like to know when the agreement was made among the member communities and how often that's revisited, and maybe what would an alternative assessment methodology look like?
So the statutory method is, since the regional agreement was created, so 1966, and it's never been revisited as to alternative method. I think sometimes with the alternative methods that I have seen, it has somewhat of the base, somewhat of the same tenet of structure of what the statutory method is. However, when you get to a point when it comes to capital, we added a stabilization fund, right, in order to add the capital piece to cover any capital costs. In an alternative method, what you'd see is you'd have your member assessments of operating of the budget, but then on top of that, they would take a percentage of your operating for that year. And I'm just gonna throw a number out, say it's a 10% capital assessment. That would be added on to the member assessment. So every year, the district, instead of setting up a stabilization fund, would have a capital reserve available to them each year. So if you've got a $25 million budget, right, you're getting a $2.5 million capital reserve every year. That would be assessed to the member communities split. So, to me, that's the only kind of alternative. I don't know if they've had it broken down before by particular number of students or things of that nature.
But as far as the share of the assessment among the member communities, is that negotiable in that type of arrangement, or does it still fall to a statutory formula?
Yeah, well, they have, and they can rely on Gene too, but some communities will have apportionment of numbers based on the towns, and that was part of the whole regional agreement as it stood. And then if you don't fill that apportionment, basically what would happen is, say Northborough had a number of seats that weren't filled, I'll just come up with a number of, say, 15. Say you had 15 seats, but you only filled 8, like you did this year. The other 7 then would be able to be moved to another community if they were willing to do it. So that it's never like they'll set a max, but then if they have additional spots because, and your town's willing to take it, they would allow you to go above. But there's always like that minimum set.
Okay, and I don't want to be a ball hog, but you did mention the capital improvement fund. I'm just curious how that went this past fiscal year. It was the first year that you had it.
Yeah, so basically what happened, that money is being held in an account. We're hoping to grow that in order to have a larger impact, because as you well know, 250,000 is not a lot when it comes to capital, especially when we have roadways and stuff to do, and we have potential other upgrades that didn't happen with the renovation project. So that's, money is sitting there and it's building.
So you didn't need to use it this particular
We
year?
didn't use it this year, yeah.
Knock on wood?
Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we
Yeah.
have to notify the towns if we are using and what we might
Yeah.
use.
Right, okay.
And.
Through the school committee, I guess, yeah, right.
The problem being is that we have something catastrophic go, we had to put a boiler in or whatever.
Right.
We can't go back to the member towns easily and collect that money quick enough to fix something like that. So it's kind of a protection for everyone, for us to have.
I was curious how it went, because I didn't hear of anything.
Yeah, so what we would do is, if and when we do use it, what we'll do is, obviously, any recommendations, we have a capital advisory committee that will be put together with a couple of school committee members, administration, a number of teachers, facilities person, the business manager, and then they would vote on that, and then when we come to present like this, we would then bring it forward to you to let you know that any type of number of money was expended.
Okay,
But we have not, yep,
thank you.
sure.
Other questions? Anything, Terry, Bob?
Yeah, I've been on this board for a while, and I've never really understood the whole assessment thing. It's very confusing me, the wealth factor and all that stuff that goes into calculations. I'd like to hear your explanation of it. We have an increase of 53 people for Marlboro at a change of 6 million, and then you only have 8 students in Northborough, it's 1.2 million. How does that wealth factor in to make such a,
I'm going to defer to Jean, because
So.
it's their world.
The whole point of wealth factor.
And Jean, I'm sorry, just for the recording and everything, can you, maybe come forward to,
Take my seat.
I can take, do you mind if I-
it'll just help for the online recording. Thank you.
So, the wealth factor is a formula the state has come up with, and their goal is to shift all of the towns and districts in the state to fund 82.5% of the minimum requirement for a school budget. The 17.5% remaining would be provided by the state. Of course, Northborough happens to be at the 82.5%. So they calculate the formula, I don't know if you heard about the foundation budget, they come up with a dollar amount for every student, for every category, administration, instruction, transportation, all the different categories, and they do it by the elementary school, preschool, high school, and technical schools, and they come up with a cost per student. Then they take that 82% that they, the combination of the 82 and the 17%, and decide, okay, this is what it costs for the number of students using those categories, and then they divide that between the students in your town, in your town schools, or in this case with Algonquin, and you get, it's by percentages again, by numbers of students. It's calculated on the percent of students. If we only have 10% of the students, we get 10% of the calculation. So if the number changes, the percentages change somewhat. But all that is out. If you go to Google, MADESE, so Google, it's easier to do it that way. Chapter 70 program brings you directly to the page. Go to the most recent date, click on that, and then at the bottom, there is a whole tab. It says, it's an Excel spreadsheet. The first tab, you can select your town, and in the first page or two at the tab on the bottom, it'll show you what the formula is for the students, the number of students you have, what the categories, and I'll give you your dollar amount. And then you go over to the allocations at the town level. You keep going through the tabs, it'll show you, okay, this is what we're giving you, and this is what we think you need to spend it on. And in a wealthier community, typically, the schools are funded, they'll fund for additional things. We're not getting funded for the 50% and the 37% increases in bus transportations. So those numbers have to, that's the bare bones education number that you're getting there. And the towns or districts have to increase to cover other costs that they may have.
What confuses me about wealth factor, though, is like, for instance, just quick math, the Northborough, just looking at the total increase and the increase in enrollment, the cost per student is higher for Northborough than it is for Southborough. And no one in this plan could ever convince me that the wealth of the community is higher in Northborough than in Southborough. So it's really hard for us when we see these bare numbers and see cost per student. It's hard for us to make sense of that because we're paying more per head at Assabet than Southborough is.
See,
But
what's
yet they're a
embedded-
wealthier
Not by
community.
much this year.
What's embedded in this formula is unknown to us, because what's embedded in this formula is this wealth factor that says, okay, so Northborough's going to pay X amount, Southborough will pay this amount. But it just doesn't make sense in a lot of respects, and I'd like to know how they got those numbers.
As I said, if you go to the tab with the number, the dollar amount, and then it's just basically a formula based on the percentage of students, but you have to look at that foundation budget formula to see, for instance, a technical school, our budgeted amount for per student, bare bones, is $17,000 and some odd. It's actually an increase of almost $500 per student this year in just that portion of the formula.
Take another look at it.
Yeah.
I've been trying this for, and I never really get.
Well, you're welcome to call me in my office, and I can kind of walk you
Okay.
through at the same time we can go through, and I can direct you to the page, and you can look at things and see if you,
All right, I appreciate that, thank you.
And something I was trying to do, and maybe page 19 was an example of that. Before I talk, though, Tim, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll see that on the screen. I was trying to do a similar bit, is take the communities that had one or two student differences and then try to understand, our overall assessment went up by 20-some%. But we also had an increase of 11% of those, in terms of enrollment. So I was trying to figure out that if students were held at the same number, what would have been our increase in the assessment, if such a calculation is possible.
so
And we haven't found any way to,
you would have
See
had,
that?
as I said, the technical students per pupil went up almost $500, so it would be the $500 per pupil at that point. We kind of take and look to see, we take the dollar amounts that we calculate for our contribution, and we do divide it by the number of students in each district to kind of come up with the per pupil, per town, per member town or member city. And we do have that calculation on one of our sheets. Yeah, so for Northborough this year, it was $22,655 per student, and Southborough was $22,088 per student. So it wasn't that much of a difference this year.
you don't happen to have our per student calculation from last year, do you?
No, not with me, but I can certainly ship that over to you if you'd like to see it.
And that might be something in the presentations going forward, is some of those metrics that are that per student cost and a comparison year on year might help us better understand the trends. And then, without, if it simplifies the amount coming in, the minimum local contributions and the other elements, just that simpler metric might help us understand where the trends are going to. So perhaps a follow-up is to maybe understand a couple years looking back, what our per student cost was, and then what it is this year allows us to see those
The
trends.
interesting thing, the largest cities and towns, their per pupil is lower than probably, for as it is, probably lower than their in-district per pupil dollar amount that they're getting. It's kind of odd the way.
Yeah, and I understand the well factor that we talked about would change that between that comparison town to town. I'm probably more interested in what our trend
well,
is
yeah.
because since the enrollment number changes each year, it's hard to know what the overall increase, decrease changes are with student held constant, with enrollment held
And it's
constant.
often like a group of friends, or if it's we'd find if the hockey team was particularly good, we'd get a lot of hockey players, and so we'd get a big bump. It can fluctuate on not dependable, reliable numbers sometimes.
Yeah. So if it's
But I can get-
possible,
I'll
if we could do a
certainly get you
follow-up
those,
on
right?
that would be really helpful
Absolutely.
to understand those year-on-year trends. Any other questions for the Aspet Valley Technical team?
I had one question about the health insurance, just because I didn't understand.
Oh,
I know, and I know you had said that it's because in the past there have been some out-of-district tuition paying. Were they going just to that line item, so that's why that line item is so inflated now? Or did something happen where the insurance has somehow skyrocketed, or?
Nope, so currently in FY '25, we have, I think I want to say it's 1.5 and some change that's currently all that health insurance is being paid for, but it's out of the out-of-district tuition line. So
Got
it
it.
wasn't added as part of the member assessments. So that's the other piece too, that I think would skew your data for the years past. We'd have to also tell you how much out-of-district tuition each year was being applied.
Right.
I think you're gonna see a much more leveled movement moving forward, because now it will be strictly all member assessments that will be paying for our operational budget.
Right, that makes sense.
No offsets, because as I mentioned when I started, $5.5 million used to be used to offset member assessments
Yeah.
when I started. So that meant your overall member assessments were down by, at that point in time, I think we had about a $20 million budget. A quarter of the budget was being paid for through member assessments. So you were seeing a 25% decrease. So you've seen that bump happen over the past number of years, as well as numbers bump up. And even on one of those slides, you'll see the MLC. If you look at one of those, I think somebody had a reduction of 2 students, but their MLC went up $68,000. Was it Southborough? I think it was, yeah. So that MLC formula, I know you ask us every year. And I will state, and I think Jean did a great job, and I even said it to my colleagues there, if you find out how that formula works, that would be great, because we've been trying to figure it out all these years.
She's smarter than we are, though, and we're not following it. She could say it 10 times. I don't think we're going to
There
follow
was a
it.
gentleman that used to work for DESI, Roger Hatch, who's retired. And he was the guy that could understand that and tell us backwards and forward. If you would have put that formula out on an Excel spreadsheet, it circles the room a couple times. That's how long the formula is. So, sorry if we can't give you a great, fantastic answer, but maybe we can get you connected with Roger to have him explain it a little bit better. Just in closing, I want to say that Assabet continues to support Northborough. There's been a number of projects. We've done some projects for Northborough, Southborough in their athletic complexes. We've done some work with the DPW to, I believe it was HVAC upgrades. And they've done some refresh of paint and stuff at the Northborough Senior Center. So that's our students contributing with their skills back to the community to hopefully save some dollars that would have been utilized for paying full-time professional help. It provides an educational, I think, space for our folks to do real-world learning and put their skills to practice. So we will continue to do that. All right?
Okay.
Anything to add?
No, still having fun.
Good for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I was sharing, I think with Jason that, and to Stephanie, that I had stepped down as chair, and I was vice chair, and my chair moved to Lancaster. So I'm back in the seat again, having fun.
Just when you thought you got away, you got pulled back.
And we're
in.
happy, yes, right?
So,
They pull you back in. Wasn't that a movie?
Godfather.
Yes.
Three, I think.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
That's not
I do, I do.
Okay, oh, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to, please. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anytime you want a tour. No. Call us up, we'll have you on.
Love that. The robotics lab, I'll bet will be fun. No, good to see you again. Take care. Tell Fred I said hi.
I think today, NASA was signing.
The wealth factor, the equalized value, growth factor. Can you hand me the remote?
Locker that's going into space. Because they've done some work with NASA.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, welcome Superintendent and team. Good to see you. You've got what you needed to stage your presentation?
I believe so. I think there are, so I thank you for giving us this opportunity to present the pre-K through 8 Northborough school budget, as well as the Northborough Southborough regional budget this evening. Joining me is Kelly Gannett, the chair of the Northborough School Committee, Becky Pellegrino, Assistant Superintendent of Finance, and Jason Little.
Honorary member of the team.
Yes. And just also want to comment on, it's been great working with Stephanie, although new to the role, but we've already started that partnership, and that is important work in terms of understanding that we are a department of a much larger budget. So that partnership is important, and it's been great working with Stephanie and Jason as always. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll start with the pre-K through 8 FY26 school committee approved budget, provide you with some context, and then we did provide the budget book, and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the detailed budgets.
You with me?
It's a little hard to do on these
Oh, I know.
remote screens. Yeah, there we go.
Are you controlling it?
And that is our presentation this evening.
Yeah.
Well done.
Wow,
I
that
like
was
the efficiency on that.
So we always start out talking about the budget really serves a purpose to try to accomplish goals, to try to improve the student experience and make sure that our educators have what they need to educate students well. So we do have our strategic plan, Vision 2026, which really is the guide that we'll use to think about what we want to accomplish each budget cycle. So we really think about the portrait of a graduate when we have students leave a grade level or transition to a new school, and at Algonquin when they transition to college or career, what types of skills and knowledge do we want students to have? So we often talk about, we want students to be critical and creative thinkers, collaborators, growth-oriented, civically engaged, healthy and balanced, and really think about the whole student and the whole child. And we also lean heavily on our core values of integrity, equity, empathy, perseverance, inclusivity, and respect. And then we have our 5 strategic objectives that really guide the budget process. So this work is always at the forefront of the conversations that we have as we look at the budget and we work with the school committee. So we do have, we do have an annual action plan, which gets into the detail about what we're trying to accomplish through each of those strategic objectives. And each year, we set the strategic actions, we work toward those, and then we provide the school committee with an update each year. So that is, again, accountability to make sure that we're moving the district forward and that we're meeting the needs of the students. The plan is designed to be dynamic, so each year, if there's something that we need to focus on that is not included in the strategic plan, we make adjustments, we update action steps to be responsive to the needs of our students. I will not go through this slide. This is just about the process. So the process starts in August. It is a lengthy process. As you know, we're on the tail end of finalizing budgets, but a lot of meetings, a lot of input from educators, from school leaders, from directors go into the process of getting to this point this evening, and I just want to acknowledge all of that hard work. Also, I think it's important to talk about enrollment trends. Who are the students that we educate? If you look at some of the data from 2020 to 2024, we saw a 3% increase in enrollment, where the state saw a 4% decline. In terms of students with disabilities, we saw an 8% increase, where the state saw 6%. In terms of English learners, the state we saw 16% as well as the state. And I think the next category is really important. Economically disadvantaged and low income. We saw a 64% increase over a 5-year period, where the state saw a 24% increase. So it's something that we're keeping an eye on, and making sure that we have a robust slate of services we can provide families. We've also become more culturally and linguistically diverse. If you look at the past 10 years, we are a much more diverse student body. I think a far more diverse community, which is exciting. And it also requires a different set of resources to meet the needs of the diversity that we are seeing in our classrooms. And then in terms of enrollment trends, from 2014-15 to 24-25, we've seen about 11% decrease in enrollment, pre-K through 8, and also at the region. If we look ahead to the next 10 years, we are plateauing, so we are not seeing a decrease or an increase, so it's fairly steady with the data that we have, barring any large-scale building project that may take place in the community. But enrollment trends are pretty stable for the next 5 to 10 years. Also talk about the successes. So our level services budgets, pre-K through 8 and in Northborough South for a regional, are a high level of service. That our foundation of services that we provide is significant and matches well against like communities. In terms of metrics, we always look at how our students are performing when they leave Algonquin. How is Algonquin performing in terms of national and state rankings? And then again, is a highly ranked educational system in the state of Massachusetts. And just will highlight nationally, it was ranked 219 in terms of STEM high schools. So that is a significant achievement in terms of a recognition. And with that said, two things can be true. We can have a great educational system and we can have work to be done. So we still have achievement gaps that exist. So we have students who are not meeting expectations in terms of the learning objectives. So there is work to be done in terms of looking at our subgroups. For example, looking at our special education subgroup, our English learners, looking at our economically disadvantaged students. When we look at their achievement compared to the average achievement, we are seeing a gap, and that is an area that we're trying to address, making sure that students have what they need to be successful. This exists in every district, and it's something that I think we pay close attention to, have a lot of data to think about how we'll improve and what types of support students will need.
Do you think that some of it is just a byproduct of a year and a half of remote learning and those types of struggles for
Yeah,
certain
so-
gaps?
Yeah, so basically when we look at learning recovery from COVID, post-COVID to now, we have not fully recovered. So some of it is learning loss. We are making improvements, but we're not where we should be. And then some of these achievement gaps existed pre-pandemic. So they have been in existence for some time, and it's something that we've been working toward. So in terms of the school committee's budget priorities, so each year the school committee spends a significant amount of time thinking about what it would like to raise up as a level of importance in terms of what to accomplish in the budget. So this year was to create 2 assistant principal positions at the 4 elementary schools, supporting culturally responsive teaching and learning in the classroom, creating 2 mathematics specialists to support the K-8 mathematics program, implement an updated math curriculum, create 2 health educators, implement a comprehensive health and physical education standards, expand safety and security measures, and then an overall kind of goal of maintaining the facilities we have, painting, making sure that they are well maintained and represent the high quality of education that's happening in the buildings. I will share with you that the budget that we're presenting this evening does not include 2 assistant principals, includes 1 mathematics specialist, not 2, does not include 2 health educators, has some money for maintaining the buildings, but not as much as we had hoped. And it has minimal safety and security measure improvements in terms of the overall budget.
I saw an alternative for 2 counselors district-wide. Is that something that's being included or not?
That is not. So where we are with the school committee approved budget this evening is it's a 3.86% increase over fiscal year 25. The incremental improvements are adding a new mathematics K through 5 curriculum. So it's a new set of resources. Has 1 mathematics specialist, and it also includes an additional 0.5 occupational therapist to kind of meet the special education needs of the students that we'll be educating next year. And then lastly, before I turn it over to Becky to talk about the finances, just briefly talk about the budget drivers. So this has been a particularly challenging budget process for FY26. I probably say that every year, but it feels more challenging this year for a couple of reasons. The first is our 5-year transportation contract ends this year. We had a very favorable contract financially, not always service, but financially it was a good contract. We have gone out through the procurement process to bid, and we had 2 bidders. One of the bidders was a 90% increase over our current contract, and the second was a 45% increase. That is a significant increase to our overall operations and budget. Part of it is a market correction, and part of it is the ecosystem of transportation right now. Fuel costs, the competitive or a lack of competition in the market. We are also factoring in a reduction of grants, federal and title grants and IDEA. So federal grants make up about 1.7% of our over operational budget. So we don't rely heavily on our federal grants, but we have seen a decrease over the past several years. And we are anticipating that trend to continue. So we're keeping an eye on what impact that could have on our overall operational budget. We are thinking that is, something that is more likely than not, but it does include a decrease. Teacher salaries, so we are a human resources operation, so teacher salaries are always a driver. Instructional resources, and then school facilities. Again, just trying to maintain the school facilities. What is not up here, but it is a budget driver at the region is healthcare. And although healthcare is not included in this particular pre-K through 8 budget, it is at the region. We understand that it is part of the town budget, so that is something that is a significant budget driver. And I'll speak briefly at the region. At the regional level, we had a 10% increase based on the work that we've done with our healthcare consultant. We share with the town of Northborough and Southborough. We have a single healthcare provider. We have an agreement with the region, Northborough and Southborough. So we've pooled our resources. And we were told that it could increase anywhere between 10 and 12%. That was the projection we were using in the budgets that we were moving forward to the school committees. What we've learned is that it's not a 10 to 12% increase. We are in the process of negotiating with our healthcare provider to make sure that it's at an affordable rate increase. They did share that it was a 24.9% increase. That's not acceptable. So we are negotiating, and we are assuming that we're asking for 16% rate increase. And like we were talking today, it sounds crazy that we are saying, oh, if only we can get a 16% rate increase.
This is why I'm glad I'm not a chief financial officer anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are collaborating with Mark Purple, the town administrator in Southborough, Stephanie in the region. We're pressing to get the least increase possible, but it is a budget factor that is new information as a result of a few weeks ago.
As it stands, would it be a one-year term, or is it a longer-term contract?
It's always a one-year
Always a one-year
term,
term,
so
okay.
we're always negotiating. So we're in the process. So that is unstabilizing in terms of what we're presenting tonight. So the Northborough School Committee meeting is meeting tomorrow night. We continue to collaborate with Stephanie and Jason to talk about what's the overall impact to the town budget. And although we do not carry healthcare costs in the pre-K through 8 budget, employees of the district are covered with healthcare. So
It sounds like we're all sinking or swimming together, though.
Yes.
Both towns and the school. It will be what it will be in the end, the
Yeah.
same for all three, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it helps us to put pressure on them, but there's only so much they'll reduce it by.
So the budget that we're presenting this evening is the school committee approved budget. Northborough's meeting tomorrow, pre-K through 8 school committee, to talk about what the impact is of this new information. And then we've been working with the leadership team, principals, to talk about, okay, what are the options in terms of trying to mitigate the health insurance costs? And we've been doing that both pre-K through 8 and at the region. So some of this information may change after tomorrow.
Then my pet peeve on the transportation, buses are empty.
Yes.
I've told my wife she can no longer pick up the grandchildren we're gonna get our money's worth.
Yeah.
Let them take the bus. I'm done. I'm okay. I'm done.
Some are, but some.
Yeah, or the other rule is that you have to take the bus so many days between K and 12th
Yeah.
in order to get a diploma. If you're not, to have those number of days, you don't get a diploma. Let's use the resources.
We hear that constantly, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not, it is true. And especially 9 through 12, as we look at, sophomores and juniors start getting their driver's licenses, the ridership from, September, October to now moving forward.
But you can't get rid of them. You can't get rid of the buses because
And-
you have to
and
have them, so.
Because we're a regional district, we're required to provide transportation to all kids regardless of whether they're on the bus or not.
Yep.
So.
Well, some of them are double.
Or the parking
Some of them are
fee
packed.
at Algonquin
Yeah.
could be the same as the parking garages for a month in downtown Boston, and maybe that'll help too, so.
That
And it's
would.
revenue, so, yeah, but,
It could be like with a new contract, a new company perhaps looking at the routes, because like my son's bus is doubled up in the afternoon and they're crammed in like sardines, but then like Terry's point, 2 empty buses will drive right by. So a lot of it too could just be maybe,
It's also quality of service. So it is
Yeah.
a service we provide, and if families feel like they can't count on the transportation because it's late or inconsistent or gets canceled.
and I didn't mean to take it down a rat hole, it's just,
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So we agree.
We could hire Uber and just have neighborhood
Yeah.
pickups,
and I'm retired, I could do that, that works.
right? Next year.
Okay, so as we build our budget, what we always look at is obviously the previous year's budget. So the fiscal year '25 appropriated budget was 29 million. And when we're looking at that, we're always trying to factor in what is a 1% increase or decrease, depending on which way that we're going. So for fiscal year '26, a 1% increase represents $291,196. So that's always in the back of our mind when we're trying to get down to the number that we're trying to meet for the town.
And can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
So just a quick note too, this is the Lincoln Street roof. So this is a solar array that we installed this past fall. So we have an array now at Lincoln and at Proctor, and currently we are in the process of installing a second solar array at Algonquin. So again, we're trying to be mindful of how can we save money. The challenge is we're seeing energy costs rise, so, but it is helping offset some of those increases.
I'm sorry, Becky, can you pull your microphone just a little
Oh,
bit
sure.
to you too, and that'll just pick you up better.
I know, I'm a soft speaker, sorry.
Yeah, she's very soft spoken. It's like the Seinfeld episode.
Although my husband might say otherwise. Okay, so where we were in the process in October, that is when the initial budget requests came into the finance office. Those requests came from the leadership team and then also from the building principals. And those requests represented a 10.89% increase over fiscal year '25. At that point in time, we did apply reductions, and those reductions are actually representative of the circuit breaker, the special education circuit breaker funds that we do receive from the state, and those were just under $1.5 million. Which brought us to the preliminary budget that was presented to the school committee in December, and that was a 5.83% increase. Internally, we continued our discussions with the leadership team, and we were able to present a revised preliminary budget in January, which was a 3.76% increase. We continued those conversations and ended up at a 3.86% recommended budget to the school committee, which was approved in February, and that budget amount represents $30,244,173. So there is a lot of work that is happening behind the scenes, a lot of meetings with leadership team, with the school committee, the operational budget subcommittee, to get to these final numbers.
Have you ballparked yet, if you do get 16% as a health insurance increase, what it looks like now?
So it's not embedded in our budget, but we are doing calculations of the number of employees who take health insurance without increase for the overall town budget.
Got it.
Yes, it would increase the town budget, but it would not be reflected in the K through 8 school budget. But when you see the regional school budget, it would be reflected in that.
Right.
So we did have about 8 line items that were over 50,000, and as you can see, the majority of those really are driven by the cost of living increases that have been negotiated. FY '26 is the 3rd year of our collective bargaining agreement with all 3 of our associations. And then the other areas are transportation in both general education and then special education. That transportation number, as you can see, is reflective of a 43% increase over FY '25. And those 8 line items in total represent just under 1.3 million. I'm going to go back to this slide, and you can see that our total increase from FY '25 is a 1.1 million. So those line items really are driving this budget. When we presented to the school committee previously, we did provide some options for some areas to be included in this operational budget. So included in the budget before you tonight is a math specialist that would be working with the 4 elementary schools, as well as the occupational therapist, which is a 0.5 FTE, and that is servicing our special education students. The science curriculum is a phased-in approach, and so this represents a second phase to that. The budget that you have does have $20,000 in it for a science curriculum. This would be an additional phase into that same curriculum. That is not included in this operational budget. So just to summarize, for the pre-K through 8 budget, it is a 3.86% increase, which represents a final FY '26 budget number of $30,244,173. And so our next steps are working with you tonight, presenting to you tonight, and then also continuing the work with the school committee on the FY '26 budget, and then holding a public hearing at a special school committee meeting. I think it's March 26th that we will be holding that special meeting. And that
Yeah, and I would characterize this budget as a level services budget with incremental growth and math curriculum and a math specialist.
Just a quick question on the 0.5 FTE for the occupational therapist. Is that person sharing another position, or is just have?
It's just a part-time. It's a 0.5.
We have a lot of part-times working.
We do have a few, in particular, in those positions, I would say that that's really where we see those the most. We're able to find people who are looking for part-time work due to life circumstances.
And oftentimes what we'll see is that Northborough needs a 0.5, the region needs a 0.3, Southborough needs a 0.2. So it's a full position. The budgetary impact is a 0.5 impact too.
Okay, that's okay. I mean, I just want
Yep.
to see that person's full-time and collecting full-time benefits and all that. I'm against the part-time getting full-time, so.
And as a part-time person, actually, they would be eligible, and a 0.5 teacher would be eligible for health insurance benefits.
But less than 0.5 is not.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
And you said the union contracts are good for this fiscal year, so it's FY '27?
Correct. Next year we'll be negotiating, next year is the last year of the contract. We'll be
Okay.
negotiating next year.
My only comment really is never to get micromanager, get in the weeds of all this stuff, but as Jason knows, and I just, when I do the overall global numbers, you keep getting to the fact that at some point, there's a Proposition 2.5 problem. I was glad to hear at the beginning that you've been working with Stephanie already because there needs to be a joint strategy
Absolutely.
as to how you guys are gonna propose to do this. There's nothing worse than, I'm sure you've talked to your colleagues, like, for example, in Natick or wherever, it's never good. It's not a good place to be. And, if we're gonna be really close to the cap this year, that kind of means, like, we get 3% increase to work with, to be under the cap, to take care of operational plus capital needs. It's a real problem. So, I've tried to encourage folks to think about, what can you cut now so that you can slow the rate of growth? And I get it, I don't want to micromanage, but with that said, you have to especially with what you got with health insurance now, and it'll only continue, how are you guys going to deal with it? And I think it would be helpful if you could update, at least at a really high level, committee such as this, as to like, what are you thinking about for next year? Because.
Oh, we already, our wheels are spinning.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
this
Just
is
even if
just
it's
the
just like,
beginning.
these are the kind of things that we would have to look at.
Right.
I think it's really important that when we give an opinion that gives, all our job is to give an opinion to town meeting, but I think that town meeting should have, as they approve things, recognition and transparency as to what's next. And while you don't have all the answers, and we're not in a FY27 budget process, you guys have been around long enough, you know where it's going. So what are you gonna talk about from that standpoint? What's the, those kind of things? I think it's important because people need to know where we're at. So that would be my comment.
I think it's also important for people to realize we are dealing with inflation in the economy, and it's like, at some point, 2.5% isn't enough.
Understand,
Yeah.
but see, the problem is that you get, and you have a lot of smart people in town that are
Right.
well-educated and great business people and understand, but at some point, it also becomes an emotional element. You have to decide, what are you gonna put on a ballot versus not put on a ballot? It just becomes a little bit of, is the math teacher more important than the fireman?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
and everything you're stating, we agree with. I think that one of the most important aspects of the work we've done over the past 5 years is continuity. There haven't been peaks and valleys,
Absolutely.
and that has been a partnership working with the town to really make sure that a high level of service maintained over time is far better than having the conversation every year. What are we gonna cut? Which positions? Town, school. So we've been trying to stay within that levy capacity.
And I have not, this is my first year on the committee after a long absence from the committee, so, and as a regular taxpayer citizen, I appreciate that, I've always noticed that, and I think that's awesome. I just have the nightmares of where we were 25 years ago when we had to go through this every year. And I understand what the dynamics become, and I'm just trying to coach us all to be as transparent and as open as possible about what's next, that's all. So.
I can't quite see the screen, but Tim, if you've got any questions, just shout out.
Thanks, Scott.
Any other questions from the committee on pre-K through 8? Good.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned on that. If I
Well, the good news is
Hold
you already
up that-
filmed the runway, so you're good, keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
If I totaled up that one additional budget impacts, about $150,000 if I did those.
82, and then
I think that, yes. Yep.
40.
Yes, yes, you're correct.
About that. Okay, thank you.
So if we could just pull up the other presentation. So our plan last week was to present the superintendent's recommended budget to the regional school committee. However, with the information that we had, we paused, we presented the budget, and then we asked the school committee not to vote the budget. We're meeting with the regional operational budget subcommittee tomorrow, and then we have a regional meeting planned for next week to talk about what the budget will look like. So again, this is what we presented a week ago, last Wednesday, but there's more work that needs to be done with this budget. I will not repeat myself. We share a strategic plan. Thank you, Becky. Similar budget process. We get to do it twice, and 3 times. But enrollment, I will speak briefly about the enrollment numbers. So at Algonquin, from 2020 to 2024, we have seen a significant decrease in enrollment, about a 12% decrease from 2014 to 2024. That was projected based on birth rates and then our enrollment projections. What we've tried to do is maintain class sizes, and through attrition, as people retire people out and not fill their positions, to try to minimize the impact. So over the past 5 years, we have less FTEs, but we've been able to maintain high quality classes in terms of class size. In terms of special education, we've seen a 5% increase. Our English learners, 37% increase. And then again, our economically disadvantaged population, a 67% increase. So it's a little bit of a changing dynamic. It's went from 6.7% to 13%. So it's something we're keeping an eye on. And then in terms of, our diversity, so we are, again, becoming more culturally and linguistically diverse. So this is a look at 2020 to 2024, and kind of the changing diversity of our population. And then again, just the bar graph of our enrollment from 2014 to 2000, sorry, can't see that, to 2034 to 35.
Yeah, 2024 to 2035.
So we are, we're kind of at a constant, a steady enrollment population for the next 5 to 10 years, unless something changes. In terms of, again, similar to Northborough, we have students who perform really well at Algonquin, students who matriculate into some really excellent schools, students who perform well on AP, SAT. So a lot of students find success at Algonquin Regional High School. It is an excellent school. But at the same time, we still have the achievement gap. We're still looking at our subgroups, our students who receive special education services, our multilingual learners, and really making sure that we're closing the achievement gap and making sure that they're prepared for the next level, whether it's college or career. And again, I won't repeat this, but again, in terms of the rankings, I think Algonquin is considered one of the top 3% of the high schools in the Commonwealth. If you look at the students that rank higher than Algonquin, the metrics are so close that, if you look at the difference between Wellesley or Newton compared to Algonquin, the data is minimal. So I think it speaks well of our educators. It speaks well of the community's commitment to education in the towns of Northborough and Southborough. The school committee also sets priorities. So the school committee's priorities were really centered around communication. The communication is really distributed. So it's distributed amongst the principals, central office staff, and we really, the school committee really would like to look at ways we can better communicate the great things that are happening at Algonquin Regional High School. So that was one area that they really wanted to focus on. The second area was really how can we create opportunities for innovation, so small innovation cycles. So that was an area that they really wanted to focus in on with this particular budget. And those were two of the budget priorities. And then we also have kind of ongoing fiscal year to fiscal year budget priorities around maintaining and recruiting a high quality staff, looking at class sizes, preparing all students for high levels of success in college and career, fund initiatives in the school improvement plan, and then fund the long-term capital plan. And then the budget that we were recommending was a 5.42% increase over FY25. And similar to Northborough pre-K through 8, similar budget drivers, transportation, reduction of grants, insurance, and benefits. So that is, we carried in this 5.42% increase. Instructional resources and school facilities. We also, there is a student who matriculated into Algonquin Regional High School who requires a residential placement 24/7 to meet the student's needs. That is a $700,000 cost that we will experience in FY25 and 26 next year. There is a lag in terms of circuit breaker reimbursement that helps offset the costs for placements like that. So next year, that is something that we've factored into this budget process. And I'll turn it over to Becky to talk about the financials.
So for the regional budget, that 1% number that we're always looking at is $278,714. So this process at the region was a little bit different than what we saw in Northborough this year. Our initial budget requests, as you can see, totaled a 15.2% increase over FY25. The amount of circuit breaker funding that we had at the regional level was a little bit lower than what we also had at the K through 8, and it was a $917,574 reduction. So we really, when we presented the preliminary budget to the school committee in December, it was an 11.91% budget with much work to be done, which we did work closely with the operational budget subcommittee as well as the leadership team at the high school, and we were able to find $1.8 million in reductions for this budget, which brought it to the 5.42, which was the revised preliminary budget that was presented in January. And it was our intention to present that last week as well as our operational budget. With those, really the key drivers for this budget, as Greg said, were the transportation numbers, as well as what we thought was a 10% increase in health insurance at the time. This is a chart that just really shows the progression of the operational budget through our process in various categories. This gives you an idea as to where some of our reductions were and where some of our changes were as we went through the process. So the significant budget offsets that we use to get to that final budget number, as Greg mentioned, we are looking when we have retirements to see if those are positions that we can choose not to fill due to attrition. So we do have 2.8 FTEs that will not be backfilled next year. We also looked at some other positions within the district, and we have captured 2.6 reductions. Those are a combination of things. One is an ESP that was budgeted for this year that was not filled, and so we will not be filling that this year. And then there are two positions that will be reverting to I guess, a lesser FTE for next year. They'll be resuming their FTE status that they had in FY '24. They were not 1.0s, they were 0.8s and 0.6s, so.
So that's where the fractions come from.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also, because of that student that Greg mentioned, we are also going to be utilizing $500,000 in our FY '26 circuit breaker reimbursement. Typically, we are utilizing the circuit breaker that we received in the prior fiscal year towards our special education costs. However, given the fact that we do have this student who is moving in, we have a number of students who actually are aging out of our program. And so we do feel confident in utilizing funds in advance for that student, knowing that in the next year, we will receive circuit breaker funding for that tuition, and then actually that student will age out the year after that. So we are comfortable utilizing $500,000 towards that, that tuition.
You're talking about the $700,000 student that's coming.
Correct.
Yes.
Where does a number like that come from?
It's the residential placement, and then if the student needs additional support during that time, so they might need a one-to-one person or a two-to-one, and that's 24/7, so you're talking about potentially,
Wow.
you know,
I just
6
don't know.
people who support a student.
I'm having a lot of trouble fathoming the breakout of $700,000.
It's quite a,
And those rates are set, actually set by the state.
I know. Of course
there-
it is.
If you remember, was it last year? They had a 14% increase across the board in all of the special education tuitions. So we're still seeing that 14% plus the 4% that they're adding this year on those tuitions.
Okay.
We also had factored on a renegotiation of our transportation bid of $140,000. I think it's, our transportation bid actually came in last Wednesday, and we were very close to the number that we had projected. So we were very pleased with the results of that bid. And then we are planning to utilize one-time funds. In FY '24, we did receive money from the state for the Emergency Assistance Family Shelter Funds. And so we are planning to use $100,000 in those funds to offset salaries of some of our ELD teachers. And then lastly, our mathematics department had planned a curriculum, to purchase some new curriculum. We are going to phase that in, so we were able to achieve some savings with those textbooks as well.
Becky, on the emergency assistance, does that keep some other additional funds in reserve for others, or would that deplete that?
so that
grant?
particular funding source, so we educated students. Last year, we absorbed the expense in our operational budget,
Yeah.
and then we received these funding. So in essence, we've already expended,
I gotcha.
and now we're just applying it back to the budget at this point for FY '26.
So this chart really, I think, is a true indicator of where the budget drivers are. If you look at the contractual obligations, the insurance costs, the Medicare, as well as the retirement program, those are all employee-related expenses. So really, that represents the largest portion of our budget. And then next would be our transportation costs, and that is 8% of our budget. Also wanted to point out that we do have line items that have increased by $50,000 over the prior fiscal year, and really there are 3 that are driving that. First is our transportation projection, which is a 40% increase. The health insurance, that was based on the 10% increase, and that is just for our regular employees. It does not include our retiree health insurance. And then instructional special education, those are COLAs that are associated with the salaries for our special education teachers. So those 3 line items are really the large, those are represent $900,000 of those 8 lines, which is $1.3 million. So just to recap, our FY '26 budget increase in this proposal is a 5.42% increase, which is a recommended budget of $29,382,156. So I just wanted to shift gears and talk about some of the debt and the capital assessments. Next year, FY '26 is actually the second to the last year that we will see the renovation and the addition long-term debt included in this assessment. The final bond payment for that work is in FY '27. So for Northborough's portion of that, and just so that the committee is aware, those percentages are determined based off of the prior 4 years October 1st enrollment number. So Northborough's portion is 61.2% compared to Southborough's 38.8%. So for the renovation project, Northborough would have $640,917. The next debt payment is for the athletic complex. We are continuing to hold bond anticipation notes. This summer, we will actually go out for our permanent financing. And so in FY '27, that will be the 1 year where you will see bond payments on both the renovation as well as the athletic complex. So right now, we are calculating that Northborough's portion of the athletic complex would be about $190,000. We will be going out, as I said, for another round of financing this summer, so hopefully the interest rates will be more in our favor at this point in time. And then the other piece is that the debt payments that are not exempt from 2.5 are those athletic complex payments, whereas the renovation project is exempt from 2.5. The school committee also approved, as part of its capital plan, a capital assessment for FY '26. And so that amount totaled can't see that number, $560,000. And it was for 5 projects. And Northborough's portion of that capital assessment would be $342,720. These are projects that have been on our capital plan for a number of years, and ones that have risen to the top and that the school committee would like to see addressed in the upcoming year.
The conversation that we did have with the school committee last Wednesday was to pause some of these capital projects, given the health insurance increase. So what we're recommending to the school committee is only focus on the roof repairs and replacement. That is a priority. That's $175,000. So if the school committee accepts the recommendation, Northborough's portion for capital assessment will be $107,100.
And so based on the numbers that we're showing with you here, these are were our projections for the FY '26 assessments. That first column, the non-exempt column, represents our operational budget. So you can see that Northborough's assessment for that would be a 5.75% increase. And that is, once again, due to the factors of the Chapter 70 funding, the regional transportation reimbursement that we receive from the state, the minimum local contribution. And so that is how the operational budget would break down for Northborough. The exempt debt would go down just because our bond payment is going down as we near the end of that. And then the non-exempt capital and debt, which includes both the athletic complex as well as that capital assessment, would be a 24.99% increase. So overall, the assessment for Northborough would represent a 6.02% increase over FY '25.
What does E&D stand for?
Oh, excess and deficiency.
It's like our free cash.
Like it's
Yeah.
retained earnings, okay.
Yes, so the school committee, we're proposing that the school committee utilize $675,000 of excess and deficiency to help to bring down these assessments.
So the school committee does have an E&D policy, so it's 2.5 to,
3.25 to 3.75.
so using 675,000, the school committee
Still
still
in
would be
that, so
within
you still
the
have
policy.
sufficient reserves, okay.
How does your plan reduction in your capital expenditures this year change that, or does it not change
It
that?
does. So we have, we're in the process of creating a plan to present to the school committee, the operational budget subcommittee tomorrow. Just with the reduction of the capital assessment, you're gonna see, we're anticipating about $125,000 reduction in assessment. And then we're also looking at potential budget reductions as well. And we'd be happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of information in the
Well,
book.
we appreciate the fact that we got this package quite early. So thank you, Jason, for sending it, and thank you for getting it to Jason, because that really helps to have the weekend to really dig in. So I guess, Scott, when the school committee meets and they approve a budget, will we just get a written kind of a packet, or Jason, will you just simply present, or, because if we don't need to call Greg back to,
So we will update the budget book.
okay?
So this document will be updated with the final presentation, and we will get that to Jason and Stephanie and that can be distributed.
Just looking to see, just double check if Tim had any questions.
I don't see the panel.
Yeah, we can take the presentation down and
I
then,
see participants up there, but would it have a mark
it
on
would have a
it if-
hand.
think he raised his hand. And
Yeah, it would have a hand. Good. Excellent. Thank you for keeping an eye on that. Any other questions on the regional budget? Good. Well done. As always, excellent information, easy to digest. Appreciate the full budget book too, to dig into those.
Usually this is our last stop, and we don't have to go back and revise the approved budgets, but we have more work to be. And just also note, I think that it's important, Southborough's town meeting is April 7th.
7th.
Which means that we are under a timeline to get the regional budget approved and move forward with. So we don't have much time by the time we have to give Southborough the numbers, close the warrants, have public hearings. So there should be a pretty quick turnaround in terms of the regional budget, and I would imagine probably for the Northborough pre-K through 8 budget, we should have that done within the next week or two.
And I can think that in preparation for town meeting, like Terry said, if there are any sort of forecasting and description of strategies for next year, other ways to deal with transportation or health insurance or, whatever. The transportation is ironically, you could tell residents to do something, but in this case, it's like, well, no, we don't want you to drive your kids to school. And it doesn't save us anything. So there's nothing the community can really do to affect those transportation numbers.
And just one comment around regional transportation. So we do get regional transportation reimbursement. Next year, there is a gap between the regional transportation we're going to receive is based on what we're paying this year. We'll get it next year, which doesn't align with the costs next year. But in fiscal year 27, we're going to see a correction. So that will not be, unless something changes, that will not be a significant budget driver at the regional level. In fact, we'll see a decrease.
What's the term of the new contract?
It's a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options.
And we are investigating having our own transportation sector, school department, at the end of this contract, which is
Good luck with that one, Greg.
Well, what's our plan to stay within Prop 2.5? That we're going to be driving.
Lay it all
buses.
out, lay it all out, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and I would just say, just one other piece, and we saw it in the packet, we're accounting for that single student that's at the Norfolk County Agricultural School. So
Saw that.
I saw that. as well,
Correct,
just
yeah,
to
so
round out
if-
the school discussion.
That family could purchase their child a car, and we could reimburse them for mileage. That would be less than the van service. if-
That,
I mean,
They
you're
are
joking,
seeing-
but
should make an offer, yeah.
It is, it's pathetic that really could work, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was an arrangement that happened one of the years that we were paying for one of the Norfolk students. We reimbursed the family for transporting the child at the mileage rate rather than paying a van service
Right.
to do the service, and it was actually a significant savings to reimburse at the mileage rate rather than.
Is there any flexibility we'd have going forward to do a similar arrangement?
Oh, if they so requested it, we can't force somebody to buy a car and insure it.
No, I'm just,
No, but
Or get their
the
license.
conversation.
but
yeah.
is it possible to initiate a conversation with the family and just see if there's some potential savings there?
Yeah, I think there's some confidentiality with the family, so that I would suggest that to the school
School side.
department to
Yes.
to talk to them. But anyway, I meant that more of a joke, but it is an ironic thing that the tuition's hovering around $30,000, and I think that the transportation will be similar. Anyway, it is good to come to these meetings and have these hearings. I noticed during the presentation that they updated the K-8 budget was updated in February, and I didn't have that number in the model, so that will be so updated as we go forward. So for my update, in the packet, there was a 4-page document. That's all we generally, very highly summarized document that we put into the town's budget. So I included that there. It's all 4 education pieces, which is Assabet, Algonquin, K-8, and this Norfolk student is in that document. So I will update the K-8 number as a result of the school committee's budget, but I think we'll have to update that again
Further
based
updates.
on the adjustments that get made as a result of the health insurance news we received just last week. So that put a kind of a cramp in our finalizing some of these budget numbers last week. So we're continuing to work on it, and I understand it would be helpful to look at the overall model, but we're still working on the overall model to determine the impacts of things and whether we need to go back and pressure departments to cut more out of their budgets because of this health insurance arrangement. The swing.
I think you should just do that.
Oh, no, we have done that.
No, we
We're
just-
saying even more.
That's just like the old CFO hat, like, oh yeah, this is my excuse, off we go.
Right, we are, but I mean, the swing is material. The difference between, we were hearing 10 to 12. When we talk to the consultants, they're usually very conservative because they want to deliver a lower rate. So we were kind of shocked to get the 25%.
Have they gone back to other health providers?
The issue was that when we were looking at the claims data, they were evaluating the claims data, and we were running above 100% of our premiums. So
Right.
that's going to drive an increase no matter what.
Correct.
The other carriers would likely see the same information. So going out at this date, it's not a guarantee. Again, that's
But
something
sometimes
we
they're looking to
consider.
buy market share too, so you don't really know until you go ask. I mean,
Right.
you might get the same answer from other health carriers, but then again, I've seen it where somebody's trying to buy market share, or they lost a big something, and they're willing to to buy market share. It doesn't hurt to go out for additional bids, frankly, but,
In the past, we have changed carriers because of that reason.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of late in the game, and we did a survey to see what of all our neighbors, and they're all high teens. So when we had 25%, it was like 24.9, we almost fell off our chairs. And it just didn't seem, and then we did more research, and it's you know, all the hospitals are bankrupt, they're being acquisitioned, doctors are getting paid more, so there's so much more. But,
I get it. I just throw out this,
oh, yeah, trust me.
it doesn't hurt to try out,
And we have combined 1,500 employees, which is great.
it's a big number. Yeah.
Yes, so we should be marketable, but
Yep.
between claims and the economy, it's,
We've had a good run leading up to this point
Yeah.
where we've
It's happened to me in
managed the
business
increase.
before. I totally get it. I mean,
just, it hits you
we
like
used-
that.
it does.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, a company of 400 employees, and you end up with like 2 people in dialysis, and all of a sudden you're like screwed.
And
So
the,
I get it.
what happened here, too.
GLP, the, like Ozempics and huge drivers,
Yep.
yeah, just in general.
Yeah, it's really kind of shocking how much the cost of the pharmacy costs
That's the biggest
factor
driver.
into
I
it.
know.
And
Yeah.
you would think that it's like 90-10. It's really like 50-50
Yes.
or that range of
You're absolutely right.
direct
Yep.
services from providers versus
Yep.
the pharmacy costs. So that's
And an option
Playing a
to
part
us
in
to
this
reduce it
increase.
was to be self-insured for prescriptions, but that is uncharted waters, and it's, yeah.
Sometimes you can get self-insured with a, your insurance
Put it
guys
this
know
way, if
better than I know.
HMOs,
No, your insurance guys know more than I do, but
Right.
I've done it where I've been self-insured, but I had a cap.
yeah,
And then but I got the benefit if it was below, but things have changed over the last couple of years. So I just throw it out as like, doesn't hurt to push your insurance guy to be creative, and he might go, I can't, but make him.
right, yeah.
I know on the municipal level that the self-insurance model has been frequently at least coming down from the state, has been frequently discouraged because there's been a number of highly publicized areas where towns have had to almost enter receivership because of
Sure.
the performance of their self-insured.
And I would
health
never do it unless you
insurance,
had a
so-
cap on it, like you knew what your total
Yeah.
downside was, frankly, but, I
And
don't
you
mean to
just-
beat a dead horse, I just throw it
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah,
So for my update, I put a number of items in the packet. A lot of this was information that was requested by the Financial Planning Committee. So since this committee's financial as well and is going to be weighing in on the same financial articles, it's relevant to you folks as well. So I figured I'd put it in the packet, and I didn't intend to dwell on it. A lot of it is information that was prepared by the Public Works Director. So there's a memorandum about the 4 West Main Street's carrying costs. There's a memo about the White Cliffs carrying costs that are in there as well. And then a outline of the Public Works Director's capital requests, and with details about the items that are in the capital plan. Next from that is a copy of his fleet list to list out all of the vehicles that the Public Works Department is in custody of. And lastly is a draft of the capital budget with some updates from what was presented at the financial planning meeting. I think I mentioned it in passing, but I want to call out that typically we take our number from free cash, $4.6 million, and have a free cash plan. Generally, we use, per our financial policies, no more than $500,000 toward the operating budget. We then have a special article for the Appropriations Reserve Fund that you folks can apply for extraordinary unforeseen expenses. That's $175,000, and that's been kept level in our model this year. we've proposed an article to transfer $200,000 from free cash to stabilization. That's the town's savings account. It's on a paper basis, it's just a stronger method for saving money. It's still,
It's harder to get it out.
doesn't change our reserves levels, because if it stayed in free cash, it would be reserves as well. So there's a pie chart in here, and I apologize, I didn't print things in color this week, but it is in the packet. The pie chart reveals that the funding gap for the general fund requests is $1.3 million from what we potentially have in free cash to apply to the capital plan. So the debt service budget that I will prepare will involve an assumption for debt for the gap between what we have available funds for and what the capital requests were. If not all of those articles pass at town meeting, that would result in us not borrowing and incurring debt costs for that in the future. But the impact on next year would be zero, because there's a lag for when debt service hits the budget. Then after that is a listing of all the articles in the capital requests in here. And following that, there was a request to look at the status of all our ongoing and current capital projects that were approved previously, and that's the last document in the packet that was prepared for tonight.
Before we then, I had a couple questions on that.
Sure.
Last piece, were there any questions about the update to the capital plan or those previous, those memos?
I mean, I don't know if it's the right time to, I would love to know what the long-term plan is for 4 West Main. What are we doing with it?
Today, we had a very positive walkthrough. The person wanted to know, okay, where do we stand? We don't, again, we can't do it that way. We have to go through the RFP process, so
course.
we're heading that way.
So the
Yes.
plan is to sell the building
Sell or lease.
or
but-
lease the building?
Yeah. I mean, that building, I could say a sale would work best, but
Okay. I just was,
But enough interest that it warrants getting a request for proposals
absolutely.
out on the street
Yes,
to.
there's
Good.
been a lot
Capture.
of, and we're speaking of, the economy and how it is, but commercially speaking, there has been a lot of interest, so,
excellent. Okay. Thank you.
yep.
Jason, this, just because it's the first time I've seen this, this kind of stuff, can you just orient me then to, let's take even just the first line item?
Oh, sure.
On that,
Are you on the capital projects list?
on the, the final two pages of
The existing
packet.
capital projects
And
that
yeah, the
that are
existing,
currently ongoing. All right, so, okay, so this listing here, I don't know if people care about the account number, but the account number is listed here from our accounting system. But the date that it was authorized, the town meeting article number, there's a description of what the project's purpose is, the department that's in control of it. There's a summary of the financing source for those projects and the amount authorized, and then just the status and the balance of what's in the project. And there was some significant discussion that happened around repairs that are being done to this building, because we are now accessing the oldest article on this list, which is the town hall project, which was originally $802,000 to make repairs here. And part of that discussion and why that languished so long was 4 West Main Street was one reason. Back in time, and I feel like an old person saying this, but I was around at the time when this article passed. The article is made up of a lot of old bond proceeds from older articles that were all combined into one and transferred into this to clean them up and get rid of old bond proceeds that were surplus.
Right, yeah.
So they went into this article, and then at the time, there was the window of time that it was known that 4 West Main Street was going to be coming back to, the town could exercise its ability to repurchase it for $10,000. And without having done an evaluation of the building or being inside it, I think the thought was that we were going to move our furniture from Town Hall here right down the street and move right into that building, not knowing what the condition was. That finding out what the condition was and what the cost would be to renovate the building for Town Hall use or potentially not being viable for that, it became clear that we're going to be residing in this building for some time, because looking at the doing an exercise like the financial summit that we did over the summer, looking out at the debt outlook and our debt policy, where we will not incur more than 8 to 10% of our budget, which is our financial policy for debt relative to debt service. We can't do 3 very large capital projects in 5 years. It's just not realistic to do that. So knowing that Peaslee School is coming down the road, if a town hall project versus a school project were, like, I don't think that the town hall project would pass if that, so the writing was kind of on the wall about that project. So that's why the previous administrator prior to Stephanie made the decision to start authorizing work to come from this article. But that's kind of why it historically has sat on the books since 2012. You might wonder why we have an authorization for so long. But there was some really mitigating factors behind that, why that stayed on our books for so long. The other 2 older ones there's one from 2014 for a wide area network installation. I think there's some, that was an article that was designed for us to install our own network cable between town buildings. I think there's a remaining amount, there's only a small amount sitting in the article still, but it's sitting there to connect the new fire station to the police station and have some network redundancies between the public safety buildings. So I think that's the intent of why that's still there. I can't remember the reason why the 2018 article was still open. There was a good reason for it. Off the top of my head, I know we revisited that, and I can't remember. There was a good reason for that remaining open. But I think maybe, was it delays
Software?
from the vendor with following COVID?
Software or something?
I think. Yeah,
That's been
it was-
COVID.
it was-
Yeah, let's blame it on.
I know COVID was referenced as one of the reasons, but, so going forward, the town hall feasibility, that project's coming to a conclusion, so that I imagine that money will either be spent or closed out at the end of the year this year. But the thing that I would like to highlight here is the thought that we have a lot of old articles sitting on the books waiting to be reappropriated for something else. That nobody should get their hopes up for that, because we're moving through all of our articles, we're sunsetting them relatively quickly. All of the vehicles, they're being purchased. There may be a delay in getting the vehicle, but
Up to 2
these are
years.
very young articles to be sitting on the books.
Well, didn't the fire chief say it could take 5 years to get this fire engine that we approved last year?
It's dragging out. I don't know about 5 years, but the 2 or 3 years, it's kind of unprecedented post-COVID, the timeline that it takes to get some of this equipment. We've had some of these. I think this ambulance that has been on the books since, let me look at this.
Just trying to see if it's even
22?
listed here.
22. That I'm
Just
sure
now.
that was ordered right after town meeting that year. That it was approved in 22, and I think
There's
he's
one
set
that's-
to
Yeah,
get it.
that's right,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's coming in any day
Yeah,
now,
any
right?
day, yeah.
I mean, we haven't paid for it. I can tell from this, we haven't paid for it yet. So it's obligated, but it hasn't been paid. So
Pictures look great.
What's that?
The pictures that have been shared so far, look,
yeah,
it's
they
gonna
may
be great.
have it now, but we just haven't paid the bill yet.
Yeah.
But that's the short term. We either just received it or we're about to receive it from that period of time. So it's taking some time.
What sort of then, so that's good, thank you for compiling that. And what sort of then flexibility do you have on that older article, especially the town hall project? I mean, is that, look like that will be able to cover some of the near-term stuff here, or?
Yeah, there's a proposed article for more HVAC work here. I think this article is going to cover some of the carpeting and some of the other smaller things.
Some of the
There-
smaller
there's a-
items, okay.
Yeah,
There's
it's
a
definitely gonna be
a
smaller.
companion CPA article that was passed alongside this that was for the HVAC, but those are insufficient for replacing the HVAC in this building at today's cost.
Right. I think we're only gonna be able to do a portion of the HVAC and the carpets, and that's it, from this amount of money.
Okay,
Yeah.
but at least it's
At least it's something.
not additional
Yes.
financing
Right,
that you'd have to do
no.
at this upcoming town meeting.
No. No, we can't ask for anything else.
Excellent. Thank you for orienting me to that too. Now I get it. Any other financial updates?
That's basically it, so, that's all that I have, for tonight. For your next meeting date, I see that, March 13th is what we have penciled in. The police chief and the fire chief are both confirmed as
Oh,
being
great.
available for that evening.
Excellent. So that will also be a 6 o'clock. Then the 18th looks good for Public Works and undistributed finance.
Yes.
And then here's where we get to pull out the calendar. So in between the 18th and the 24th, when is the warrant publication such that we've got to have the final report?
It has-
It would be good to have the recommendations by the 24th, and Stephanie, you may know the drop dead date for the printer to get the report completed. But typically, we have a little bit of a runway between when you vote recommendations and finalizing the report for the book.
So I want to make sure those two milestones, that
Right.
we've got the recommendations recorded even if we're finalizing.
Yeah, the drop dead date for the selectmen to agree to set the warrant is the 19th. But they're looking at, so the 10th, we're going to, I think we'll be really close on the 10th. And then, yeah, it's so many days before town meeting, so yeah, the dead date would be the 19th, so they could have a special meeting prior to that if there were any changes, but I would say the 10th will have a lot confirmed.
So does that imply that our meeting at the 18th, we've got to vote the recommendations?
No, you're still on for the 24th, I believe, right? This is just
24th
to,
is our joint budget hearing.
Well, they won't have the warrant, they might not have the warrant articles final until the 19th, right?
right, but
saying?
they need to send them to town council just for language purposes and whatnot, so we had a set date of, by the 19th.
So we can't make our recommendations then prior to the 19th because we need to make sure the article language is final.
Yeah,
Right.
you know what, so after the 10th, March 10th, which is next Monday, is it? Yeah,
It
it must
is,
be
yeah.
next Monday. We'll get back to you guys, but maybe we'll have to,
Yeah, and basically,
Move that up.
it's figuring out two dates, right? Which meeting do we need to vote our recommendations? And then when do we need to submit the final report? And if we know those two due dates, then we
Right.
can plan for probably one more meeting in between.
I know, and we might have to move it up, now that I'm thinking of it, but, because I think it was the 24th that you guys were scheduled to come in.
Yeah, the 24th is the hearing, so.
Is it
That's the joint hearing with the select board.
Select board, yeah.
Oh, so we should,
That's when the budget needs to be done.
we might need to do a Tuesday and a Thursday in the same week then, right?
Well, that's just your motion to support or not support. right? So I'm just talking about the actual warrant articles. Is this your support or non-support at town meeting, or, yeah, I don't know how you guys
No, it's
typically.
before.
So,
because
so
we do the
usually at the joint budget hearing, we're not taking a vote and making recommendations. And I think in the past, we've made our recommendations before the joint budget hearing. Am I
Okay.
Yeah.
on track?
Yeah.
It would seem to me if it's a public hearing, we would want to hear from the public first before you recommend
Yeah,
or
before.
disapprove or whatever.
Right, right.
And there might not be any comments, but I think it's appropriate not to, to let the public have their say before we opine.
So that then would give us whatever time there is between the 24th.
And whatever
joint budget
date they need
hearing and what time
a formal report
formal
to
report.
get to the printer.
Yeah. Yeah, we have
Typically about
plenty
2
of
weeks that
time.
you have to get to the printer, I think is the.
Yeah,
kind of
and
that,
it's
but-
actually a relatively quick turnover from what Angie was saying, so.
But I mean, once the committee is clear on the message it wants to put into the report and its recommendations, typically, the vote has been made to authorize myself to work with the chair to finalize the report, the document itself. So that just gives a little flexibility to the group so that it doesn't have to have another meeting in between town meeting night and the completion of the document. There's also been the event where information was not forthcoming until the night of town meeting, and opinions have been withheld up until the night, and it's been printed in the report that the Appropriations
Yeah, last
Committee
year
will
was-
will opine at the meeting, so that there is some runway to.
So if nothing else changes, probably an agenda item at the end of the meeting on the 18th would be asking you all that if you had input for the report, like the narrative of the report, topics, that'll be like the homework, if any of the committee members has a particular topic that we want to include in the report, we can talk about that topic and how to draft, those paragraphs or whatever. And begin that process so that at the joint budget hearing, we hear a little bit more from attendees. We hear more from the select board and financial planning. And shortly thereafter, our next meeting would be able to finalize that narrative or finalize the draft of that narrative, vote our recommendations, and then authorize myself and Jason then to finalize the report in time for the publication in the warrant. So that kind of timeline. So
But would we get a chance to opine on the final report? Or are we just going to delegate all of it?
let's see what the timeline is. I'd like to be able to issue a final,
My memory is you did
even if we
last year,
don't.
Right? Yeah.
Let's see what the timeline is, because ideally, could have a draft that goes out to everybody, and we'd have one more time
That would be
to then adjust it
preferable to me.
to that timeline.
Just,
Right.
So between the 24th and town meeting, we may insert one or two quick meetings.
yes,
To finish
I think
that.
that's very reasonable.
I did
And
meet with,
there may be differences of opinion, and I think it's appropriate that we have, it's kind of like the Supreme Court. There's the opinion, there's the consent, and then there's the dissent, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, so. And I think that's very appropriate, so. Yeah, that might take a couple of iterations to get all that.
and we met with the moderator, and he was fine with consolidating all of the capitals as long as they're read off, and you could say hold. if-
Yeah, and I have some opinions on that. I'd much rather see someone recommend a consent agenda
Okay,
rather than combining articles. So if I was allowed to give some advice, I would say continue with the separate articles, but then going into town meeting and even with the select board discussion ahead of that, talk about which ones could be proposed to be combined as a consent agenda as the first order of discussion that we, have at town meeting. And because it's hard to, one, if you combine too many things, you're going to have differing opinions then sway the vote, right? You might have one item that folks would want to hold on if we were under a consent agenda. But if we're not, if it's one combined article, then there's not that opportunity. So the balance, I guess is what I'm saying, is separate articles.
I think what was
Organized in a
proposed
consent
was a consent agenda.
And then just, it's really, and then it just relies on the moderator to be really clear that if someone has a hold on one of the items, or wants to hold on one of the items of the consent agenda, they know this, what to do.
I think the draft I saw of the warrant was just reorganizing the articles so that it would fall in a way that would make it conducive to a consent agenda.
Right.
And
It
that's
wasn't
what I
clear at the
understood it
select
to
board that
be.
they were talking consent agenda, and so that's why I said it now.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're pointing out the technical difference between
Combining
taking
articles.
10 articles and turning them into one article in the warrant versus there being 10 articles that on town meeting floor are combined into one vote.
Yes.
So I think what you're talking about is what was being proposed, but
It wasn't clear at the
Okay.
prior board
Okay.
meeting. It was confusing. Great, so, yeah, as soon as we can figure out those due dates,
Yes.
then
Yep.
we'll back out and we'll plan some additional meetings.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, and
and I'm not opposed with meeting remotely too, if that works for other people
let's
as
see how it
well
works.
with
Let's see how the
these meetings.
timeline works, because if it's something where it's, the votes were, let's say, unanimous,
Then it's easy.
then there's not much to discuss. Then remotely, we could finalize the narrative of a report.
Right.
Right? And so let's see what our deadlines are, how that maps against the calendar and additional meetings, and put in the time there.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Any other business? Because we've
No, I think
come to the
we
end there.
talked about it all.
All right. I'm just looking at the participants there for any raised hands. We're in good shape. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Bob, second by Terry. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And I am an aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.